Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the Improved Podcast, the official podcast of Classic Studios. I am your host, Chase Collins, and today it's going to be another solo episode. We are doing back-to-back solo episodes, so I hope you all are excited for that. I do have some housekeeping things that I have to do in the beginning, so if you're not interested in all that, feel free to go to the time codes in the description and jump around to the parts that you're interested in. But I do want to say thank you for listening, and I hope that you achieve your goals this week. I hope you think about your goals this week and you achieve them. So once this intro music rolls, I'll be back and we can get into the good stuff. Welcome back to the Improved Podcast.
Improved Podcast. Improved Podcast. Improved Podcast. Improved Podcast.
All right, so we are, we are kicking off the podcast with a couple of housekeeping items. I am delinquent on a couple of things that I've promised you all and have failed on, so I'd like to apologize. I missed last week posting. That was a mistake, I guess, or an error. I don't know. I decided I needed to take a break so I could really, hone in and focus on my screenplay. If you've been, following, you know that my goal was to finish the screenplay by March, and it's almost the middle of March, and I just needed to dedicate some time to focus on writing, which I've been doing. So I have some great, updates and progress topics or whatever that I want to discuss with you, and I'm super excited to share all that. But I do, apologize. I don't want to miss episodes in the future. I don't like missing episodes at all. So didn't mean to do that. Just needed to really focus on the writing because, that's why I started this. And if these additional activities that I'm doing, like doing the podcast or the blog or the Classic Studios stuff, is taking too much time away from my writing, it's not worth it anymore. I want to be writing. That's my goal. So I had to take a break from doing the podcast and just really focus on getting the writing done, and that's what fills me up. That's what gives me the gratification of doing work, and I don't get that from these podcasts or blogs or stuff. Those are things I feel like I want to do in order to document, and I want to share with you all because it's fun talking about it, and it's a way to keep up with all of my friends and stuff. But writing, that's the main focus, and so I don't want to lose that, I guess, which is funny that's a fear of mine when I'm doing a writing podcast of that. Oh no, I'll lose hold of my writing. But I'm not worried about that. I'm not really worried about that, but sometimes you just got to take some time to focus on working on, what you love. And that's what I did for these past couple of weeks. Took some time, worked on screenwriting. Can't wait to share that with you all. I also haven't posted the Classic Studios blog for March yet. That was supposed to be posted on Friday, a couple of Fridays ago. So, oops, sorry about that. Didn't mean to do it. But I am working to get that out to you all this Friday. So if you're a dedicated, eagle-eyed listener and viewer, that is coming for you all. The wait is over. It's coming on Friday. So look out for that. And I think now, I'm ready to go ahead and get into some of the screenwriting updates. Can't wait to share. So it's, I've been writing a lot, and it's been really great. I've been working on it hard these past couple of weeks. I really struggled a lot. You've been listening or watching, that I really was struggling a lot with this story in the beginning with the outline phase, and then got through that, was able to make some good progress on the first act, and then the second act I started slowing down a lot, and there's something just wasn't working, and I talked about this in the last episode, and I resolved that issue live on air. So if you want to hear about what I was struggling, go back and listen to that. But I really wanted to talk more about how the story has sort of changed, and I think how that impacted my progress. So I preached a lot, about outlining and how outlining the story was one of the biggest challenges I faced while writing it. And then, trouble getting through the second act. And with that, how I start my writing process is I commit to finishing the outline. Before I do any writing at all, I got to get that outline done. And once I did, once I finished outlining and started writing, the story evolved and changed a lot. And I think that's why in the second act I was really struggling, because there's a lot of, none of the major like story beats changed, but how these characters get to those story beats is what was changing, I guess. And I suppose that comes out from these characters' personalities. As you start writing them, they start to come out and they start to provide their own input into what the story should be or how it will play out. And that those changes, small, whether they're like dialogue lines or anything like that, they impact the trajectory of the rest of the story. And so what I've learned is that by starting the story where I've started it, these characters are in a place where they're brand new, right? They know nothing. They just have a goal that they're trying to achieve, and they're working towards that. And in order for the story to get to the point where I think it should end, where it has the most impactful resolution, there's things that have to happen, and I've outlined those. But as I've sort of started making changes, or these characters have started influencing the plot of the story, I've noticed that my story is starting to grow, I guess, a little bit. Not in major ways, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But I'm realizing there's more scenes that need to take place in order for this story to have the most impact that it needs. And while I was learning that, I'm kind of casually like deviating from the outline, adding scenes here, adding character moments here, and that's been really great. Like, I think it's really added to the story, but it's impacted the overall flow and structure of the film. And that's sort of what I really want to dive into, is like the 3-act structure. And that's something that I love. I really believe in that storytelling device, or what's the better way to phrase that? Whatever. I like it. The 3-act structure. It's great. It's when, I've probably talked about this on other podcasts, especially the one with my sister, if you've heard that. But, the first act, it introduces the characters, it introduces the world, the inciting incident, and then you have your first plot point at the end of the first act, which sort of kicks off the rest of the story. It sends the character into the unknown, into this new world where they have to start making choices and making decisions and learning about the new world that they're sort of thrusted into, whether that's willingly or unwillingly, right? That depends on how your story flows. And once that first plot point ends, the second act begins, and that's when you enter the unknown. You're into the chaos of the story, and that's usually a much longer act. It contains about 50 to 60% of the movie, and it has your rising actions, your second plot points, the midpoint twists, maybe some rising actions here and there, some obstacles that must be overcome, and then you finish your third act, or you finish that up with the third plot point and the climax of the movie. That's sort of where it culminates into the climax, is right at the end of the second plot, right at the start or second act, right at the start of that third act, which then focuses on a falling action. Maybe there's some resolution, or there's a resolution, maybe there's a falling action, something that carries the excitement through till the end. And as I was writing the second act and really wrestling with it, trying to figure out the best way to execute these plot points, I got to this midpoint twist, which wasn't actually the part that I was getting hung up on. It was earlier than that, but whatever. It was like one of the obstacles or rising actions that she was trying to overcome, and I couldn't crack it, but eventually broke through that and got into this midpoint twist. And as I'm writing that, I realized the story, or from like a structural perspective, I was struggling to keep all of the scenes like organized in my head, I guess. And so it felt natural to transition this, 3-act structure storyline or story into a 4-act structure. And the 4-act structure is a little bit different. I think I don't know much about it, but it's essentially what happens is you split the second act into 2 acts, and your midpoint twist sort of marks the end of the second act, and then you begin your third act as they ascend and become knowledgeable in their journey, this new world that they're entering into. And so I restructured my story so that the second act is split into 2, and then that third act becomes the 4th act. And so right now I'm in the 4th act, so I finished up completely the second act, which is really great. Or the second and the third act. I finished both of those now, and for some reason organizing the story was so much easier but when I split it into 4 acts. It allowed me to really like take each act as its own story, and that was something that has only just like become apparent to me. And I think maybe it's indicative of like I'm becoming more aware of the nuances and the level of like attention required for stories to be told in like an effective way. And that's been really gratifying, I guess, seeing that play out, of how each of these acts have their own inciting incident, rising action, twist, and then conclusion as we progress through the story. And of course, stakes are higher and lower depending on how far we've progressed through the story at that point. But it's been really nice to see, and I think each of these acts work on their own as stories, and when they all come together as in this final product, I think it's going to really, really work. And so I'm really excited about that, and just super motivated. To get into some of the more like nitty gritty details. I told you the story sort of expanded since the outline. So when I first outlined this, I had about 41 scenes, something like that. And I know not all scenes are going to be the same length, but that looks about right to me if I wanted to hit, a page count of like 90 pages, something like that. And I was about right. That's about that's to be expected, I guess. That I think that feels right. I can't back it up like, oh yeah, 40 scenes in a movie is average. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems right for this film. And now that I've sort of re-outlined and have all of my scenes picked out, I'm well over 62 scenes, and I think that they'll probably expand. I think it'll probably end up around 65, 70 scenes, and I'm about maybe like a quarter to halfway through my 4th act, and the page count is still just in like the 70s. So we're good. Like, we're in great shape because I've added a number of like scenes that the scene count has grown exponentially, right? It's what is it, like 50% more scenes, so that's quite a bit. But the page count has stayed on track with what I projected, about 90 pages. I think we'll hit that. And that's like a good thing, I think, because these scenes that I've added, they're not fluff. They don't feel like filler. They're something that helps build out the story and push the story to the next plot point or whatever. It feels like it works. All of these scenes, it doesn't feel like I'm adding any fluff or anything like that. So I'm also excited about that. Like, the story is becoming rich and it's becoming detailed, and there's like real consequences to these characters' actions, and that's been a lot of fun because this story is a very character-driven story. And I guess, forgive me, I've just nerded out on outlining and how much fun that is, and I'm about to nerd out on writing and the plot and the character, because that's been a lot of what this story is about, and that's been a lot of what's come to light with these past couple of weeks of really dedicated writing. Because it's great. And so what this story is, they're obviously story and character are very intertwined with each other. And Mary Lee, my main protagonist, I guess you would probably call her, the POV character. The story unfolds from her point of view, her decision making. That's what is driving the story. But also, coupled with that, she's an unreliable narrator. She lies a lot. She lies to herself. She lies to her friends. She lies to her parents. And so that creates a lot of conflict that Mary Lee has to deal with. She's really struggling with this, and she's lying not because she's like a sociopath or she wants to manipulate people to her will or whatever like that. It has nothing to do with that. It's very much she doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know what her truth is. She doesn't know who she wants to be. So she's figuring it out, and maybe that comes across as lying. Maybe that's how it's perceived, but it's not ill intent, I guess. She's really just learning and figuring out, and we get to witness this character make mistakes and go through the process of learning how to be an adult. Like, what does that actually mean for children who are routinely told, like, oh no, this is, there's a path forward for children if they so choose to indulge, right? You can go to high school, get a degree, go to college, get a degree, take out a loan, whatever you need to do. I think there's not a lot of choice for children a lot of the times. And so the situation that Mary Lee Barber is in, it allows her to make choices and really have the freedom to do what she thinks is best because of the way she's being raised. And I think that's a really interesting character. Sorry. Chapstick. I think that's like a really interesting character and a really interesting way to tell the story. And one of the elements that I love about this script is that it draws heavy influence from social media type content or, type of contents. One of the elements I love about this script is that it draws heavy influence from social media content and how that content is presented to the audience. And that's been really fun, I guess, because I grew up on YouTube, right? Like 2005 YouTube launched, like boom, I was there. Got my first iPod Touch and I was on YouTube 24/7. So I was raised on this type of content and it feels correct. It feels like that type of content needs to influence this story because it was true for me in 2005. I was raised on YouTube. It's even more true now for this younger generation. So I think pulling in some of those like devices, some of the flavors of content online, like on YouTube, independent content creators, using those types of tricks to like help push the story, I think is a good call, and I think it's very on theme for this story. And one of the elements that I have really pulled is the use of voiceover. So that's, I think y'all are familiar with voiceover, but YouTubers use voiceover a lot. It's like their holy grail of editing and storytelling devices because they're able to give important information to the viewer very quickly. It sets up the story, this short 5-minute story or 15-minute story that they're trying to tell really quickly. It gets the viewer hooked. They're ready. They're engaged. They understand what's going on. Now, in like screenwriting, and maybe this is true for like movies in general, I guess it probably is. I don't know. But I've heard that using voiceover, especially to like kick off a movie, is kind of frowned upon. It's seen as like a cop out, I guess, because it sets up the story. It pushes the narrative forward through like clunky exposition, So it's sort of frowned upon, right? It's like not what producers who are reading your script like to see. It's not exactly ideal. And so you've seen how I outline, you've seen the rules that I follow. I follow the rules. If there's something that's frowned upon, I don't want to be doing it. So I would like to stray away from that, but I think all of this, all of the signs indicate that this is right for this story. You combine this prolific use of voiceover in online and digital media content. If you're pulling from that genre as inspiration, I think it's unavoidable. But it doesn't have to be, that doesn't mean that it has to fall into the same traps that voiceover typically falls in when you're dealing with, cinema. So I want to make that voiceover more interesting than just a simple exposition jump. Hey, here we're setting up the next scene. This is how my character's feeling. We're pushing it forward. You're you're along for the ride, right? You buy off on this. That's what essentially I'm telling you. Here's the premise. Don't ask any questions. Like, okay, yes sir. But I don't want to do that. I think that would be a cop-out. It would be too easy. It would make this movie boring. What makes the movie interesting is that Mary Lee Barber is an unreliable narrator. So when you have a character doing voiceover who is unreliable, I think that makes for a much more interesting, much more nuanced viewing experience. You get to hear this character, tell you, hey, I'm the happiest I've ever been. I love my life. I'm having a great time. And then in the very next scene, you see her having the worst day of her life, not having a good time. She's totally wrong about how she perceives the world or her experience in the world. Like, that's not a good time. That's a bad time. And you need to recognize that. Stop lying to yourself. So I think that's an interesting tool that can be used throughout this story, and I've always written this story with that in mind. However, while writing this story, I really wanted to focus on getting the actual what happens in the movie down right before I started, okay, now how do I play with how this story is viewed, or how is it presented to the reader or the viewer. Now that's when the layers of, being unreliable, the lies, cluing into like, oh, maybe this character isn't nefarious in nature, but just like a little young and naive and is figuring it out. And I think that's a really fun idea. So I hope it works. I'm really excited to try that. Once I finish writing this thing, I'm excited to go back and, add those flavors and details. Because I think it could, give you real insight into, her internal turmoil and this mental state that she's in. Like, what does that really look like, and how does it manifest itself in the digital world? I think that's something that's really interesting. Another something that came up during these last 2 weeks of writing is this. So this isn't really how it works, but I'm going to say this is how it works, but it's not as concrete. But after I have this story, or I'm outlining, or I'm in the middle of outlining, or I'm about to write, I usually create a playlist of songs that I think capture the spirit of the characters or the story that I'm writing. I've done that for every one of my scripts that I've written. And it always helps me. I like writing with music, so I just throw that on and I start, writing, and the vibes of the music just gets me in the right place to start writing. And that definitely worked for the playlist I created. It was a lot of Olivia Rodrigo, Taylor Swift, Lana Del Rey. I think there's a Sarah McLachlan song on there. So it's a lot of this coming of age, high school music that I love. It's great. Just listening to these 17-year-olds cry about their problems. Oh yes, give me that. That's what I need for this story right now. So I'm listening to it, and it's just fun. But as I started getting into the second act and the third act, I realized these characters are changing. They're growing up. They're no longer dealing with high school problems. Suddenly the world is becoming real to them, and their actions are having consequences. So this high school vibe of songs that I was listening to that sort of capture the world in a very specific perspective, in a very specific state of mind, weren't working for the story anymore. So I had to create like a new playlist that better captured the spirit of these characters now, right? Because they start off in this very innocent young phase, and then they progress and become a little bit more confident. They have a little bit more attitude. So I had to add more songs like that sort of fit the flavor. So I added some SZA in there. I got some more deep cuts of Lana Del Rey and Taylor, just to help with the writing. And that's been a lot of fun. It's really, I didn't expect it to influence my writing as much as it did, but it totally did, man. When I was listening to some SZA and she's like talking about smoking on her X-Pac, I'm like, dang, dude, this girl, Mary Lee Barber, she is a boss girl. She is killing it now. And, I feel like if you go to the first act, it's like, no, she's not. She's this little girl. What are you doing? But she gets there. I think she gets there. And it might, like, reading it back, it might come off as like inconsistent tonally. But I'm hoping not. I'm hoping it'll all still work. But we'll see when I get into the rewriting. So yeah, I'm really, really excited for that, and excited to see this story wrap up. Like I said, I'm about a quarter to halfway through the fourth act, about 70 pages in. So theoretically, if I stick to my 90 page count, I only have like 70. Oh no, I have like 25 more pages to go. So that's really exciting. I'm super pumped to get to finishing this project. I'd like to say that I will be finished in like a week, but it'll probably be closer to the end of the month, just based on how I do things. Probably gonna be closer to the end of the month. And one of the reasons I'm so motivated to finish the screenplay is to, one, meet my March deadline, right? That's a goal that I set for myself. I'm going to stick to it. And the second reason is because I'm so excited for my next project, or my next set of projects that I'm going to start soon. I really want to give you like a teaser or something, but I can't say too much because, one, like, I don't really know what this project is going to look like. I know what I'm going to do, but I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know when you're going to see it. If I was being like ambitious, I'd say, oh, you'll see something in 6 months. And then 6 months will come and I'll be like, yeah, I'm totally not ready to launch this project yet. So really, the earliest, it's like maybe 2024 you guys will see what I'm working on next, but maybe not. Yeah, we'll see. 2023 just started. We'll see. I'm very excited to share it with you guys. I can't wait to see it, or I can't wait for you all to see it. I can't wait to make it, and it's something super exciting. It's visual in nature, and it has to do with screenwriting. Maybe that's a teaser. I don't know. So that's the next big project I'm really excited to start working on. It's going to be a ton of fun. Oh my gosh. And I have also like a couple of smaller projects that I'm working on in parallel with that. Because even though it's a big project, I don't think it'll take up like all of my time. I think it'll take up like a couple hours a week, maybe, not even that. So I'm just going to be working on smaller projects to like pad out the time, I guess. I want to, and what are those smaller projects? I can tease those for sure. I have a short film that I've been cooking up, that I really want to write. I think it's a great story. I think it's really timely and important. It's an important story that I really want to tell, and I want to make it a short story because maybe I'll like produce it myself one year. But I'm really excited about that short film that I want to write, and then I also want to try taking a stab at like writing a comedy movie. I think at the beginning of the year I said I wanted to write like a comedy TV show, but I don't want to write a TV show, man. That sounds way different than writing a movie, so I'm not going to do that yet. I think the idea for the TV show I have is really good, and I think it's be really funny, but I don't want to write it right now. I want to write movies. That's what I'm focusing on. So I want to write this comedy movie, and I'm excited about that one too. I have a good premise set up for it. I want to be like, all those like 2000s movies. Maybe it was 2010 movies. Yeah, but like the Judd Apatow, Seth Rogen type movies. I'm really interested in writing something like that for the modern era. It's like we need those stupid high school funny comedies back. You know what I mean? I haven't seen one of those in a minute, so I want to write one. It's like, why not? I think that could be fun. Like, what is what does getting into trouble look like now when every high schooler has a smartphone and and everything like that? I think it could be fun. Yeah, really, really looking forward to working on that project, but I'm not going to start until I finish this screenplay. I've been really, really disciplined, or holding myself back, self-restraint, whatever it is. I've been really trying not to spend too much time thinking about any other projects other than Mary Lee Barber. Of course, I'm a writer, so I'm always going to have ideas come up when I'm, laying in bed or driving or whatever. But I started, jotting down some notes and stuff like that. But I'm not going to start actually working on these until I'm done with this first draft. And I'm really excited because that's coming around pretty soon. And I'm super stoked about it being finished and getting on to the next thing. So that's awesome. With that, I think it might be the end of the podcast. So I want to thank you so much for listening. Again, I apologize for not posting last week. Thank you so much for letting me do 2 solo episodes back to back. I actually really enjoy these solo episodes. It's a way for me to take some time and sort of check in with myself and talk about the state of my writing. All right, a lot of these, points and things that I'm bringing up with you all, they're things that I know to be true, but I never verbalize them. They're just things that are cooking up in the back of my head, and I'm thinking about it, and then translating that into words is helpful. So thank you for letting me share those. It's really beneficial to me. And yeah, so I'm really grateful for you all, and thank you for listening. And I'm working on getting some great programming lined up for these next couple of weeks. I can't wait to share updates on the projects that I'm working on, maybe some new projects, maybe some new guests coming up. So thank you all so much for listening and sharing and subscribing, and please comment if you would like, and if you'd like to leave a 5-star review on your podcast app of choice, go ahead and do that. We read every 5-star review out loud on this podcast, and so if you want to review it, go ahead and do it. And if you want us to read it, leave it 5 stars, baby. All right, everyone, I hope you're enjoying the rest of your week. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. I hope you have a happy daylight savings time. Shout out to Green Bean for all of our musical themes. And with that, I hope you achieve your goals this week, and I will talk to you all next week for another episode of the Improve Podcast. Goodbye.
Podcast.